Hi guys!
Hey guys!
Welcome to This is Mark and Michelle, episode 13.
Yes, this is our lucky episode.
Yes.
Only because it's going to be just as good as every other episode, maybe even better. Anyway.
Okay, so Mark wanted to start with the intro to our book.
Yes, this is...
which will lead us to other conversation.
Yes, this is just a rough draft of the intro, and it'll probably be a little bit longer than this, but I wanted to read it to give you an idea of why we're writing this book and why heal from autism and that kind of thing. Hey, Roxy joined.
Oh.
Let's start out with reading this. Not very long. People smarter than me say hindsight is 20/20. They assume hindsight clears all loose ends and answers all questions. It doesn't. Looking back on my life from my first experiences in kindergarten, I see I was born to live a varied life as an autistic person. It was also part of the plan to heal from my autism, to live through the changes required to become a neurotypical person, and to write about those experiences for the benefit of others who choose to heal their autism. This is my mission. I've heard many autistics say autism is acceptable to them, even a gift. I've heard them say that they are inseparable from their autism, that it makes them who they are. I've heard some loved ones of autistic people ascribe special powers and talents to their Audis. I say to all of these folks, believe what you choose, but beliefs literally make or break lives, so make sure they're good ones. Almost everything I attempted in life failed. I ran into walls I didn't know were there. Later, I found out these walls were social. I became so frustrated by all the failures that I eventually shut down completely with depression and crippling anxiety. My depression pushed me to consider ending my life. Obviously, that never happened. Thank God, autism was amazingly frustrating. Without the dead ends I often encountered, I might not have turned down the road I needed for understanding. Instead, I persisted in finding a way out of horrible social situations, bullying, even into my adult years, school, depression, tough financial situations, and finally, out of autism altogether. This is our story of autism, struggle, frustration, love, marriage, and healing. We won't spare feelings. If necessary, we will be cruel to be kind. Our story will open a door for you to see that there is a possibility of losing something not worth keeping.
So that's the intro to the book at this point. I'm sure it'll be edited a million more times.
Yeah, and things added to it, and right. More enlightening, deeply revealing things. But
so that led us to Mark had some experiences the last couple weeks with adult Aspies, one of whom has been diagnosed and the other one who has no clue.
Right.
And so part of the reason Mark wanted to read this intro and then speak about this is that emotional landscape was non-existent, and that's what he was talking about, the social not being evident at all to an Aspie.
Right. So this term, I use the term emotional landscape. We coined it, and it may not be, it's unique to us, but it may not be unique to others. There may be psychological terms or medical terms that explain this, but here's what I mean by that. The first question is that she was going to ask.
Yes, I was going to ask. Mm-hmm. Define emotional landscape for our audience and give examples.
Okay, well, emotional landscape is this. I wrote down a short meaning, a short definition, but I'll be more explanatory. Emotional landscape means the prevailing emotional tone of a social interaction. And what I mean by that is, to explain this even more, is that when you walk up, NTs normally do this. They are able to assess how a group is feeling, or at least the emotions that are being transacted between everyone. And again, that's natural for NTs because you grow up doing it. You may grow up learning how to do it. I don't know, but I've somewhat had to learn how to do it since healing from the autism. And what to be more explanatory, even more about this, is that you can't just walk up to a person or a group and, to me, just start talking without some kind of assessment of how they're going to receive you or where they are emotionally at any particular point. Because if someone is angry, and I'll give a good example of this right now, and you don't know it, you walking up and just starting to talk to them right out of the blue may just further piss them off. And I recently had this happen with one of the managers at the store I work, Whole Foods that I work at. I had a question for him, and I didn't realize that it was inventory day. Okay, now that is the bigger context of this interaction.
That he wouldn't have gotten as an Aspie.
Exactly, that I wouldn't have gotten as an Aspie. And in fact, well, I'll explain the interaction. So I walk up to him and I ask him, hey, have you talked to such and such a person about putting up the job application so I can apply for it? Well, he immediately got mad and he said, it takes more time than just a day to take care of that. Well, I'm a person who likes to get things done quickly. Well, this particular manager, at any other time, he would have been easygoing. But I didn't know at that point the larger context of it being inventory day, and that just pissed him off. Well, 2 other times I tried to interact with him to see how things stood that same night, and by the 3rd interaction, it seemed very personal. So I told him, Brandon, how's it going? Lisa, how are you?
Kristen?
Brandon works with me, just so you know, Brandon. And so after talking with this manager 2 separate times, I finally told him towards the end of the night, look, from here on out, just act like you don't know me, because it seemed very personal. Now, I understand that it was inventory day after I talked with one of the other managers in that department, but I didn't need that kind of response. But that's okay. I now understand why he was that way. And later on, that same manager and I talked about it and we worked it out. But as an Aspie, I never would have understood walking up to that manager and saying, hey, have you done this? I never would have understood why he got upset.
And that's the emotional landscape Mark's talking about.
Exactly. That's a good example of it. And the reason I wouldn't have understood is because I wouldn't have connected that he was stressed out because it was inventory day.
Right, because he didn't have his own mind in your mind.
Exactly.
It's called mind blindness.
Yes, and I have lost most of that. Not all of it, but probably 75% of it.
You've lost a lot.
Something like that. And that's a good thing, because another good example is back in 2015, Whole Foods was going through some layoffs, and that was in October. And I remember after the people, a lot of the team members getting laid off after they left the store, you could feel a very general feeling or emotion of people being upset that friends and coworkers got laid off. I had never felt that before, ever. I had never, ever noticed it. And that was the first time. That was October of 2015. That was fascinating to me, because then I could see, oh, now I can see if someone's upset about something even before I actually get there. And so emotional landscape is that. I know that took a minute to explain, but giving you good examples. See, NTs normally do that, but autistic people do not.
Why is this concept important?
This concept is important. NTs, now, even NTs can't always assess.
And by NT, for new people, we mean neurotypical, which means a normal brain.
A person without autism, exactly. And so even NTs can't always perfectly assess the emotional landscape of an interaction or someone else or of a group. But autistic people usually can't assess that at all. And I could not when I was autistic. And so learning So coming out of the autism and then being able to feel how people were. In other words, another good example is this. When I was still autistic, a man came up to me and said, well, my daughter just died. My autistic answer was, I'm sorry to hear that. Notice that was a complete monotone answer. There was no emotion in that. There's no whatever. I couldn't feel how sad he was. Now I would be like, sir, I'm really sorry to hear that. I mean, that would actually make me feel sad now, but I had no feelings over that when he told me that then, and that was just 2011. But being able to assess how other people feel before you interact with them or as you come up to them really makes a difference in the ease of your life. Because when you're an autistic person, well, I should say when I was an autistic person, not being able to see that caused me all kinds of trouble, because I just walk up to people and ask them questions when they weren't ready for it. And not being able to know what their particular emotional state was just made it even worse if they had just lost a loved one or had broken up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend. I mean, you just never know as an autistic person. So people seem unpredictable to you only because you're not able to predict them. And that's also called theory of mind, which gets talked about a lot in the autism literature, is being able to assess another person's state of mind. In this case, it's also a state of emotion.
So you have interacted with 2 adults recently with autism. What was most noticeable about those interactions?
The most noticeable about those interactions with the man, the most noticeable thing about that interaction was he had no clue as to what was going on. I was in the middle of watching a TV show, and I even said, hey, I'm watching a TV show. But as an autistic person, that did not register with him. And so he sat there and continued to talk and talk and talk and talk about whatever he wanted to talk about, and which I finally realized, okay, you know what, that's fine. I can come back and watch the show. So I turned it down and we sat there and talked. And I mean, it was actually fun talking to him, but at the same time,
you saw that there was no emotional landscape knowledge.
Yeah, there was no, he did not assess what was actually going on in the room before he came in and sat down, or even when he sat down. And even when I told him what was going on, it still didn't register. Now,
you would have had to say, you may sit here quietly, but I'm going to watch this show.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that probably would have pissed him off.
I don't know. It might not have.
It might not have, but as exactly the way she put that is exactly the way you have to be straightforward and set boundaries for people with autism, at least with me. And so, yeah, I walked away with a lot of hurt feelings many times because I could not assess what was going on with a person or a group of people. And so I was always an outsider, and I felt like an outsider. That much I can say.
Well, tell me about your interaction with the woman.
Well, the woman, very fascinating, because the man is actually a student of Michelle's, and the woman on the spectrum, she's a little older than me. I think she's in her early 50s. And her son, who is also on the spectrum, is a student of Michelle's. She is not. But she and I sat in the living room. Michelle teaches at home. She and I sat in the living room. We talked for a good hour. And I wanted to ask her, as a woman with autism, how much emotion she sensed, either from other people or from groups. And it was fascinating to find out that she only sensed a few more emotions from people. I told her to start out with, I told her my emotional vocabulary consisted of 2 emotions when I was autistic: anger and frustration. I said, I imagine your emotional vocabulary is a little wider, or you had to have a few more emotions in your vocabulary list. And she said, yes, I can feel when people are really sad, and I can feel when people are really happy. But she said the anger and the frustration were what she identified with most. Now, that's fascinating. I said, can you identify despair as opposed to unhappiness? And she said she couldn't, which that seems to be normal. I couldn't tell the difference either. Those are subtle differences. Despair seems to have a note of hopelessness in it, to whereas unhappiness is just a temporary situation and it feels that way. But the fact that she couldn't, as an autistic woman, couldn't feel that means to me that probably most autistic people have this trouble of being able to distinguish one emotion from another, which causes all kinds of trouble. So it was nice to find out that I wasn't crazy and that she isn't crazy. It's just what the autism is and what it does to you.
What seems to be the detrimental to this lack of awareness of the emotional landscape in these interactions?
The detrimental part of being unaware of an emotional landscape is that you are always going to be on the outside of social interactions, unless they're very basic ones. I mean, if somebody comes up to you and says hi, then you generally know to say hi back. Now, I'll be honest, when I was autistic, I didn't always say hi back. I just tended to stare at people as they walked by because sometimes I was just too afraid to say hi. But because there was a lot of anxiety that went with it. But really, the detrimental part is not being able to interact with a person's emotions.
It's not the same playing level.
The playing field
is not level.
Well, between autistic people and neurotypical people who aren't autistic, the playing field is not level. Because autistic people don't know that their emotions, when I explained to the woman why she had trouble with jokes, and I told her there's body language involved, there's nonverbal communication that isn't necessarily body language involved. I said, plus there's expression around the eyes. She just got overwhelmed and she just couldn't believe that there was that much involved in communication, let alone jokes.
But then you told her that you didn't have to analyze it with a normal brain.
Exactly.
And so it just happened.
Well, and
she would have had to analyze.
Well, and that is the thing. Autistic people would have to sit back, and they can do this. I did this, and I was successful to a point. And I've heard of and known other autistic people who do nothing but analyze everything they see, and they're successful in figuring it out to a point. But the more subtle, the more humorous, the more interesting parts of human interaction are very subtle and they're not apparent. And I told her that now, having lost my autism, I don't have to analyze. I can just watch what goes on, and I almost always know what it means about 80 to 90% of the time. If there is a little meaning that I can't figure out, I don't usually worry about it, or I ask her about it later. But the detrimental part is really not being able to fully interact as much as you need and want to with another non-autistic human being.
Is there anything else you want to say about this?
I only knew that I was missing out on the really deep parts of interactions with other humans once I realized I had autism. Because as I read more about my autism, I started to understand that, there's a gulf that separates autistic people and non-autistic people. And it's nobody's fault. It's of no one's making. It's just one person having autism and another person not. But that gulf keeps autistic people from a world that is, I'm going to be honest, absolutely fascinating, because there's a lot more now between just me and her than there ever was when I was autistic. I don't fully get her, but then she's a human being that has depths that I don't yet know exist. But that same thing can be said for other neurotypical couples as well, because we are now both neurotypical. So what I want to say is my reason for losing my autism was because I was angry that I was missing out on something. I was missing out on love from her and from others in my life. And I was angry that I couldn't get what I needed in life and live the way I wanted, and to interact with her the way I really wanted to. So that's why I lost my autism, is because I wanted to live life fully for me. So that's what I have to say about it.
All right. We're almost 21 minutes, so let's leave them with some hope.
Okay? That is why the GAPS diet exists. This is why the medical medium diet exists, because there is hope to lose autism if you find it might be possible for you. So you can contact us. We can show you how to get started. We can coach you every step of the way and get you out of autism if you want to be out of it. And do I know other people who have done it? Yes. To believe that autism isn't treatable or curable, that's fine if you want to believe that, but I don't. And I hope you don't either. So talk to us if you need help.
Talk to us. Good to see you guys.
Have a good one. See you next week.